I am going to not waste any more time in requesting our next panel to come up on stage. The next panel is slightly different. Now, here were companies which were using a lot of technology. Now we are moving into a completely opposite direction. Many traditional companies in India have struggled with broad subject of innovation. The illumination of that field of innovation with digital technology seems to further increase the challenge. This session aims to bring some clarity on the interplay between innovation and traditional companies and its enablement by technology. So the moderator for this session is Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan, who has been a corporate leader for 50 years. He has served as the chairman of Unilever Arabia, as MD of Brook Bond Lipton, vice chairman of Hindustan Lever, as director of Tata Sons and several Tata companies. He right now serves as an independent director and non-executive chairman of Castrol India and Hemas Holdings PLC Sri Lanka. He's a newspaper columnist, continues to write every month. He has authored 9 books, and he's, as you can see, he's an international speaker, serves as a distinguished professor of IIT Kharagpur. He was an alumnus from there. Most importantly, he's the executive in resident at SPJIMR and a guru to all of us. Sir, please. I will also invite the other panelists of this panel, Mr. Ramesh Ramachandran, who is the strategy head of the $4 billion farm equipment sector at Mahindra and Mahindra, and is also responsible for identifying and incubating new revenue opportunities. He's on the board of 3 agri-tech startups, one in India, one in Switzerland, and another in Canada. He has 26 years of experience in innovation and has worked with Unilever and Shell in India before he worked for Mahindra. Mr. Ramachandran, Mr. Haresh Chawla. Go ahead. He is the partner at True North, one of India's most experienced and respected private equity funds with over $3 billion under management. His work in founding Fuel is considered the gold standard in thought leadership. He's best known for the leadership in transforming the Network 18 group into a formidable media network. He's also a visiting faculty and executive with residence at SPJIMR. Aditi Namdeo. She is the part of the leadership running the Center for the 4th Industrial Revolution of the World Economic Forum in India. She leads the operations and business engagement at the center. She comes with extensive corporate, public service and consulting experience with PwC across Europe, India and Australia. Mr. Ajay Srinivasan. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Aditya Birla Capital Limited, the holding company of all the financial services businesses of the Aditya Birla Group. His leadership has enabled the Aditya Birla Capital Limited to become one of the largest non-bank financial services players in India, with leadership position in several verticals. Hi, Aditi. RG, over to you.
Okay, before I start, let me get some data insight. Do you want me to stop at 1:15? Because I just want to know my time schedule. You're starting 20 minutes late. Yeah, 1:15. So we'll finish in 40 minutes. I'm afraid it's going to be, I don't know if you're relieved or unhappy. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here and talk to you. I come from 2 very traditional companies, Unilever, Tata. The definition of a traditional company is those that are not geeky. And you saw in the last panel people trying to demonstrate that ordinary companies can also look geeky. I have been greatly struck through my own experience to the fact that since all of you have been introduced, I'm not going into that. I want to go straight to the subject, which may be of interest to this audience. We all talk of innovation, it's the biggest buzzword. And we all talk of technology, it's the biggest buzzword. You put the 2 buzzwords together, you can get a real heady concoction. So I want to make this session into something experiential rather than theoretical, because we can all read the same books otherwise. And I would like to begin by asking you, and just to keep pump the adrenaline a bit, we won't necessarily go in any sequence. Allow me to choose a sequence. I want to ask you to share what this means to you from your experience when you combine innovation and technology. Specifically, remember, we are talking about so-called traditional companies like yours. Yeah. So why don't you start? Sure. What's the hassle you have?
Let me maybe just give you a couple of examples to sort of follow your context of the adrenaline and stuff. So it's critical to us I mean, needless to say, the purpose that we've defined for ourselves as a company is democratizing technology for small farm landholders. So just by way of context, I work for the farm equipment sector of Mahindra and Mahindra, which sells tractors and a variety of farm equipment to farmers across the world. And this small landholder is central to the way we do business, and therefore we craft what we do to the needs of the small landholder by way of the size of the machines, the affordability, accessibility, simplicity of operations, etc. The purpose we've defined for ourselves as a company is to democratize technology for the small landholder. So in a sense, that particular buzzword has found its way into the mainstream of how we do business. Clearly, the idea would be to innovate using technology. So it's innovation that is enabled by technology in order to build value propositions that help the small landholder. To do this, we use a lot of external partnerships, startups and stuff. So some of the companies that were on stage and even smaller versions of those would be part of this whole process of ours of delivering value propositions to the smaller landholder. I'll give you a couple of examples. So the first area is the area of what we call precision farming. And precision farming is really about helping farmers with value propositions that reduce their input costs and consumption and that improve their yield. And the underlying technologies are AI, robotics, IoT, big data, etc., etc. For instance, for potato farmers, we have a value proposition which helps them optimize their fertilizer consumption. So it's a two-step process. In the first step, we map the farm, the field, the soil, using a tractor-pulled implement that has sensors, which maps the farm into high, medium, and low fertility zones. And then after that, we fertilize using a variable rate kit that's able to read the map and dispense fertilizer accordingly. Similarly, for grape farmers, we have a tractor which has cameras mounted on it that drives on the farm and photographs all the crops. And then using AI, we create heat maps which show the areas of infestation of pests. And in the second step, we would spray according to these maps. So it's very much a part of our future and everything that we're doing right now. Now, having said that, it is an emerging area. And then there is a core business, which is the business of selling tractors and making the kill and keeping us in business, really. So I think that like for all businesses which have a core business that are working on new businesses, we have similar sorts of challenges, and I've heard you speak about them as well in the past. So I think this handover from the teams that incubate, that birth the idea, that work with the early versions, the prototypes, etc., to the go-to-market business, that handover is often fraught with risks.
You make a very interesting point, because I'd like to contrast this with the financial business.
Yeah.
In your case, you're saying I keep doing my stuff, agriculture 1.0. You have to sell tractors, you have to plow the land, you have to plant seeds, all that stuff. And that's where the revenue comes from. And you're saying simultaneously there is this apparent fringe stuff, but which could become very central. It may take 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we don't know.
Correct.
We have to live in both worlds.
Yes.
And that's part of the challenge, but it's what we need to do. That's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
I want to go to Ajay. You're living in a different world, finance 3.0 or whatever you want to call it, where you're being eviscerated. Your industry, people are saying there won't be a bank. I don't know how true it is, but I'm just telling you what I've read. You don't have the luxury of sitting down and saying, I'll carry on my old business and fool around with these little things at the fringe.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
So I think I'll start with the question you originally asked, and then I'll answer what you're asking, which is, I think this whole issue of innovation being for some people, not for other people, traditional companies and not existing. In my view, I think innovation is a mindset, and I think in industries like ours, like you say, if you don't have that mindset, you're very quickly going to be relegated to non-existence. And just as you see with people who reinvent themselves and are constantly innovating to reinvent themselves as personalities, I think companies are seeing it as well. Again, I think we sometimes get obsessed with big innovation. Sometimes I think I've seen many small sets of innovations actually accumulating to something big. And I think the third question was the link between innovation and technology. And again, I'll go back to our industry. One end, of course, as you say, is being disrupted by technology. But the other end, you can do some very simple things not using technology. Service features. You can, we innovated the idea of a free look period in life insurance. So you buy the policy, you don't like it, in 15 days you can come back to us, take your money. Nothing to do with technology, but it changed the way the industry functioned. It's now become an industry norm. Or this notion of a fixed maturity product, which just mimicked the fixed deposit. All you did in the mutual fund industry was come up with a product that just mimicked what a fixed deposit was, because customers wanted certainty of return. Nothing to do with technology. It's become a very, very large part of the mutual fund industry. But equally, there are many things in technology that I think we have to take on board and do. And I'll give you 3 or 4 examples of things that we are doing. We borrowed from what people are seeing on e-commerce sites today to come up with the next best offer on our site. So if you come to our site, we're a conglomerate, so we have multiple products. But we can use the same algorithms and the same machine learning to be able to say, if you came on our site, what would the next best product be for you? We've used robotics to basically automate 150 processes in the last year. Obviously, we replace some human beings, but we also make our processes more scalable. But I think the most exciting thing for me is to be actually innovate in terms of a new business. So we've launched a health insurance business, which we think actually turns the industry on its head. Because traditionally, health insurance is meant for people who are going to make health insurance claims. That's the way we've traditionally thought of health insurance. People buy it to make claims. But we've turned that on the head and saying, why can't we get in people who actually will not make claims? They will subsidize the people who make claims, but we will provide them value by helping them stay more healthy. So it's actually providing people the ability through wearables and interconnected devices that allows them to stay more healthy, so that they, in a sense, become more profitable for us to pay. So I think you have the entire spectrum of innovation, and I think we shouldn't restrict ourselves to one or the other, because I think we're seeing all of that play through in different ways. And the challenge, I think, for large corporates, as you said in the opening, is that because you tend to become large, you tend to become a little slower, you tend to start believing in the past, and those need to be constantly challenged. But again, to my mind, it's a mindset issue. It's nothing to do with the construct of the business.
So that's very interesting. Both of you come from what I might call the operating business, as it were. Whereas Aditi and Haresh are the people who are the chefs. They are operating at the tawa level. Not on the tawa, but they are putting ingredients into the tawa. So I want to go to Aditi and ask, before I come to Haresh after that. I'm changing the question, because if I keep the same question and everybody has to answer it, it becomes boring for us and certainly for the audience. So let's keep sort of flipping it around. You represent Industry 4.0, and we all know the origin of that, how Angela Merkel called the head of SAP and manufacturing and Germany. Now, India happens to be in the world's top 5, maybe top 10, in both software and in manufacturing. So it seems like a very ripe candidate. China is not, Japan is not, we are all set for it. Why is it not happening?
Well, let me...
And what are you doing about it?
Well, I'm not sure if we are the mandated organization to do anything about it, but we are definitely trying. Let me infuse that answer with a little bit of introduction to what this center is doing, because that's important for people to understand. Back in 2016, the founder chairman of the World Economic Forum, Professor Schwab, was reached upon by a set of governments as well as private business holders to say, listen, the world is changing and technology is changing business models at an accelerated pace, and we are bursting out of the seams in several places. There is this great lack of awareness, let's say, in the public bodies, but at the same time, there's some amount of resistance and change which is needed in the private mindsets to accept this change wholeheartedly, embrace it, and then work on defining new models. So there took the birth of the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where we actually work on enabling technology through governance and regulation. Why I'm saying this is because it's important for the answer as to you asking what are we doing about it. So we definitely know that technology is an enabler to innovation, and they are going both hand in hand. In fact, many a times people are blindsided by the technology piece of it so much that they forget what are they innovating for, what are the customer requirements, what is their main objective, and because they want to infuse so much of technology in their models. So we turned the question around and we said, first define the objectives of technology enablement. Is this for the business good altogether? Is this going to impart social parity? This will impart social empowerment? And therefore, what will it take for us to enable that technology? Because until and unless most of these technologies are enabled by the government, the policies, the laws, the rules, they won't be able to be accepted and embraced in both public and private organizations. So we've started looking at 10 such emerging technology portfolios: artificial intelligence, blockchain, drones, IoT and smart cities, precision medicine, digital trade, so on and so forth. And in India, 2018 we opened the center in India, quite resonating to the question you asked. We opened the first center in San Francisco, then came to China, Japan, and then India. We identified that Asia being the most populous region where technology is going to impact the most biggest part of the world population, there is no reason why the center should not be formed here. China, we all know, the government is very, in some sense, very centralized and very dictatorial in terms of technology changes. So they are innovating, but at a very centralized pace. Japan is, of course, experimenting a lot, and they are open to innovation. India is a very, very complex model as compared to all of these three. The Silicon Valley, the traditional Silicon Valley in San Francisco gives birth to a lot of these technology disruptions, and it is enabled by the government there. In India, we have this very complex federated model of governance. We have the central bodies who are part regulating some of these technologies. We have the state governments which are actually adopting and doing a lot in their own state jurisdictions about these technologies. Somewhere there is a miss of a handshake or a organized way of taking this path ahead. Specifically in the area of AI, and the panel before we discussed about facial recognition, we discussed about data privacy. Most of the startups in India are working on these emerging technologies, or they are making products which are related to data dissemination, data analysis, facial recognition, autonomous mobility, and so on and so forth. But they also need the hand of the government to help them take this ahead. And that's where the forum plays a role. So we are going out in India, and we are working currently with some of the central ministries as well as state ministries, and we have created some kind of sandbox projects where we are looking at, for example, with the government of Telangana, we have now started to look at drones for medicine from the sky, where we are looking at how the medical value chain can be enabled and made more efficient by deploying drones for carrying blood samples, carrying organs if you may so require. These are done in experiments, by the way. It's not that it's not being done in India. For sure they've been done, but they are unregulated experiments. What will it take for a Ministry of Civil Aviation, for the DGCA, for the state jurisdictions, for the Ministry of Home Affairs to come together and enable all of this is where the forum comes and plays a hand. So I think to summarize, many such experiments. We are working with the government now, with the central government. We are now looking at creating the basic ethics in AI principle and guidelines, which will help guide the private and the public bodies to say, okay, if you are deploying an AI product or if you are making an AI solution, what should the ethics guideline look like? So we've started working on blueprinting some of these emerging technology principles. But it would take a little bit of the play of both the public and the private cooperation to take this ahead, and that's where I think India may be seemingly lagging, but we are definitely innovating at a very breakneck speed.
Bravo. So we've got two words which I just want to place on the podium. Mindset. Both Ajay used it and so did Ramesh, and they talked about. And the second thing that has come is coordination.
Yeah.
That you call it a federated economy, public, private. And all sorts of parts. So I'll come back to these two words later. Haresh, I see you as a sort of a nutritionist or a general physician, a very successful one at that, who sits and looks at companies and takes those companies that want to jump up in scale and help them those that can be turned around and something can be done, the use of imagination. That's why I called you a sort of a chef. You take the same ingredients and look at it differently. Share with us your perspective. How do you see Indian industry responding? Are the same problems of coordination and mindset or something else?
Yeah, so you know, the way I look at it, I think innovation and technology needs to be dropped as words, and we need to have survival as a word. In the last 9 months, 56,000 crores have been put into startups. So any business, any company is in, there is a bunch of 25-year-olds being funded by a wall of capital, and they're out to get your bread. They're out to eat your meal. So I think one part is very clearly that any traditional company cannot now ignore. If you look at a company, what is a company? Company has an internal ecosystem which is trying to serve an external ecosystem. In India, the external ecosystem has very quickly become completely digital. Your suppliers have become digital, your customers have become digital. Everything has got a software or a digital skin on it. And internally, I think companies are still living in the past. So I think one of the challenges is that companies that are existing, all the challenges of mindsets are there, but now it's become a survival challenge. So I think innovating on the edges of the organization is no longer going to be, sufficient. For example, in your tractor business, I think some people overfund Uber for tractors. Tractors are hardly utilized more than, let's say, 10% of the time, right? So suddenly you'll face a demand crisis. So unless you do it on your own, so I think what's going to happen is that the core of business models are companies that are coming that are much leaner, completely data driven, and have the capital and the ability to actually, even if they do not utilize capital very efficiently, it's not important because they can get massive market share. So I think that's what drives that flow of capital there. The second part is that if a company does innovation, which is not technology-led, technology actually acts as a steroid because, when you talked about launching your maturity policies or stuff like that, the fact that now you can reach millions of people directly, that you can sell these to your existing customers. So essentially, it's part of two parts of the technology. One is to survive, and other is to grow. I think those are now a given. There is no way to run a company anymore in this world or in India by not thinking digital in every part of a business. And remember, all of us, the single flaw I see in managers, we are Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. In our personal lives, we would like to press a button and get a meal from Swiggy instantly. We'd like our Uber to land up immediately. We'd like to know our bank account balance immediately. Try and redeem a mutual fund and do it before 2 p.m. You expect the amount in your bank account next morning. So in our personal lives, we are completely digital. But try and extend that courtesy to your customer? No, that's not happening. So I think one of the biggest challenges required in the companies is that the mindset has to be completely shifted. In a bank, for example, the siloization is massive. There is a credit card division, there is a debit card division, there is a car loan division, there is a personal loan division, there is a division that loan against securities. All of that needs to be one because the customer profile is available on one dashboard. So actually, as long as you have a customer monetization division, it should be able to do all of these things. So I think that's the fundamental issue, that we have segmented our organizations, and that has to shift to segmenting our customers versus, this whole siloization that was needed in a certain age where information was difficult to have. You could not give information down. Today, the CEO and the lowest level employee in the company can have the same customer dashboard. So the quality of the decision in a company is not dependent on how senior you are, how experienced you are. Those are strategic decisions, but on operating decisions, you actually have to change your organization and bring things down to the front end. So I think some of these challenges are there in these companies. And we've seen companies winning. If you see what Jio did in using the whole Aadhaar UPI Aadhaar backbone, they were able to recruit 100 million customers faster than any other company in the world. You could walk into a Jio store and walk out with a working connection in 5 minutes. Do you recall what used to happen when you used to go on Vodafone and Airtel and try and get a connection? You would put in the form, your connection will get activated next day. 1 day later, you'll get a call.
How did they get the Aadhaar information? Was it right for them to get it?
No, the Aadhaar backbone was available. They got, sure. So
can I as a private sector go and get all the Aadhaar information?
No, not Aadhaar. You're doing KYC using Aadhaar. They got permission to do that. Many companies got that till the Aadhaar regulation changed. But I'm saying the backbone is available today. You see what UPI is doing. I think the fundamental innovation that's happened in India is happening at the level where access, the public digital roadway is being built. So today when you have a UPI, you have Aadhaar, you have the account aggregation that's coming up. So of course, these are all issues. There are issues in these. There are issues of privacy. There are issues of too much government oversight.
But that was the subject of the previous panel. So
no, sure. So I'm saying it's a separate issue. But I'm saying that the digital backbone of this country is now publicly available. It's not happening in any other market in the world, except probably Estonia or some of the other countries are trying. But you have 1 billion people digitally active, fully accessible. Of course, there are going to be issues on policy. But that backbone is available to every company.
So, I want to be provocative and say, if you've got it all available, then why do you need CAA and NPR and all that?
Exactly.
You can't be right.
If this is being recorded, we can't speak about it, right?
but jokes aside, I want to provide audience participation. If all of you agree, in 5 minutes we'll throw it open. So those whose brains are tingling and stomachs are aching, please get your questions ready. And if you can be precise with your question, it will be very helpful, because we want to get maximum value out of this session. And so we got 5 minutes. I want to again provoke the point that Haresh made. He said, you know, Uber can come and knock you out tomorrow. Not Uber the company, but Uberization. And you will stop selling tractors. How would you deal with that situation?
Okay, so again some context. So this is something we are aware of, and about 3.5 years ago we created our own Uber for farm equipment called Tringo. And at the time, of course, there was an internal debate in terms of isn't this jeopardizing our core business, because you are asking a farmer to rent instead of buy. Now the fact is that the agriculture industry is quite unique, and renting is not a new phenomenon. They're very, very business oriented. A farmer is business oriented, and he or she is not going to buy a 5 lakh rupee tractor and just use it for 100 hours a year. They will want to get more usage from it. So there are many rental entrepreneurs out there in the market, and renting is common. So our proposition was to essentially organize what is a fragmented, disorganized type industry, and to bring digital into it, and many of the good things that we've been hearing Haresh say. So absolutely Uber type solutions are possible. They are happening. We were one of the early entrants into this space by way of doing it digitally, etc. But it's easier said than done. So what I'm saying is,
forgive me for provoking.
Yeah,
if that
I am provoked.
If that 25-year-old guy he referred to comes along tomorrow and says,
no, but there are many 25-year-old guys there.
Yeah, already doing it.
Yeah. So many 25-year-old people are doing many things in agriculture. It's not an easy game.
You're saying the system itself.
It is a phygital game. The physical element is in the context of agriculture, where there's a piece of land, stuff has to be done on the land, the soil has to be turned, the crop has to be sprayed. So of course over time there'll be more and more digitization, and that's the reason we're working on precision farming and a bunch of other things. There's a long list of things we're working on. We're throwing the dice, absolutely. But in terms of the conversion into the millions of users like Jio or like WhatsApp and stuff like that, that's not that easy, right? Because you go farm by farm, you convince, you change behavior, there's a physical element to it, there's a digital element to it. So the hack, everybody's looking for that hack of getting to those million, despite the fact that this is the intrinsic nature of the business, but it's easier said than done. So I think that we're on that journey. We're on that journey of figuring out, we're doing all the right things with the future in mind, but what is that magic button that you can press whereby you got 1 million people using it, in 1 month?
Ajay, you want to say something?
I think, I said 2 structured ways in which we're dealing with it. One, every year we take a bunch of our people to visit the valley, to go to China, to go to Europe, to see actually what's happening, because I think that's a very good way of tangibilizing the threat that you're going to face, because you can actually see it in operation somewhere. And the second thing that we've done is really tap into the startup ecosystem in a very big way. So we just closed a program. We came up with 17 problem statements we're trying to solve, dealing with some of the threats that Haresh referred to. We get 1,000 guys coming to respond to you, telling you how they can help you. You go through a process, and we've now identified 20 of them who we're working with to help us get ready for some of the threats that we think will come from outside. So rather than think of people as competition, think of them as collaboration, and collaborate to compete really.
Aditi, you wanted to say something?
All of them should come to the World Economic Forum, because that's what we are trying to do. We are bringing the multi-stakeholder community which includes the public bodies, the private bodies, the civil societies bodies, mind you. As Ramesh said, community engagement for implementation of technology in India specifically is the most important pillar. Until and unless you take out the fear from the broader community, the fear of loss of job, the fear of how will it be done, the fear of money and the security around it, the digitization won't take place at the grassroots level. So I think including all of these voices in one place, letting them hear each other and getting them to share their data. One of the other projects that we've started with Government of Maharashtra, which is still work in progress, where Ramesh has been collaborating with us, is creating this interoperable data platform, where we are saying farm production companies, farmers themselves, the agricultural department of Maharashtra, the FMCG companies, all of them come together and share their data on one platform, the startups as well. So if there are agricultural startups who are wanting to create new solutions around giving precision farmer advisory services, they could use that data freely and not pay a lot of money around for innovation. If there are big corporates such as Mahindra and others, they could seemingly learn from these startups saying, okay, what are they thinking, and therefore what do I need to change in my business model? There could be farmers who would be thinking, okay, this is where the change is happening. How can I actually think of digitization my own farms? Do I see drones? And the fear of alienization is decreased. So what we are doing is bringing these multi-stakeholder communities together to come, discuss, have a dialogue on these topics and create an implementation roadmap which is acceptable and inclusive of everybody.
Aditi, you made me very sad. You invited all of them to Davos, but not me. I would like to throw this open to the audience because it's 1 o'clock and I had promised that we'll have 15 minutes of interaction. As you can see that this is like a dark tunnel and we are all pilgrims holding a candle and walking around. And I think our conversation will be significantly enriched if the audience could ask questions or make a comment. And Vinita, are you the master of ceremonies? Where is Vinita?
Yes. Yeah. We have lots of our students also in the midst. So please raise your hands and we'll pass the mic to you. Hi, this is Nupur. The question that I had was that currently R&D departments are a silo in organizations. What we are looking at is changes that should happen at the grassroots level. Are the organizations, as companies like yourself, would be interested in giving away 2 hours of the employee time to engage in innovative processes every week? Just 2 hours of their time every week for engaging in creative activities which might be related or not related directly to your work, but might end up in innovative products for your own organization.
You got the question?
Yeah. Sort of.
Sort of.
I can take the question.
So will you be able to give 2 hours of your employee time for their own creative process? Not directly probably related to your...
They probably do it anyway.
Yes.
Sorry, just kidding. Go ahead.
So can I take the question? So, I think I'll go back to the point I started with, which is about being a mindset. And if it's a mindset, I therefore don't believe that you should have innovation labs, R&D departments, because it is everybody's responsibility to innovate. And if it's everybody's responsibility to innovate, I don't need to cut out 2 hours to innovate because you should be innovating as long as you're in office. So I think you have to change the way we think about this to make it a more continuous process rather than, oh, by the way, now I'm going to put on my innovation hat, put on the light, and now I've got a great idea, but now I go back to my mundane job. I don't think it works that way. I think you just have to have it as a regular part of what you do. So I just have a different approach to the way you're approaching it. You'll have to innovate a bit because I can't hear you.
So see, while you're on your work desk, you will be probably thinking more about the actual work that you are doing. Sometimes innovation happens organically. You might be working on something which is completely different. And it might percolate because you're always thinking of the problem statements that you're working on. It might percolate to your work itself, right? So it is a completely different way of thinking, but I think that has its own advantages and the way innovation can actually work out. It also gives you a space where you can connect with other team members from other divisions and have very engaging discussions and things like that.
Okay, on behalf of Ramesh, without his authority, I will commit that he will spend, all his employees will spend 2 hours thinking and whistling in the wind. Next year, you'll be called to report back on the results.
Yeah.
Next question.
Thank you. I have Professor Sridevi on the left-hand side corner wanting to ask a question.
So I have a concern. The ability of these technologies to replace human knowledge and human resources, and I think there are predictions that there are going to be large-scale layoffs going forward. How do traditional companies, handle innovations in such a way that they achieve this human-machine, reconcile?
Ajay, you'd like to go?
Yeah. So I think there will be a whole host of jobs that will get replaced by machines. I think there may not be a bad thing because you'll get humans to do things that they're more capable of doing, use more human intelligence and and leave things that machines can do better. I definitely see that happening. You may not have call center employees anymore because I think intelligence will allow you to do everything on with a bot rather than having people. So I think you'll see a whole host of industries getting disrupted. We should be ready for that. But I'm a big believer that ultimately human beings will evolve to be able to work better with machines, and I think it will lead to a better use of human intellect and a better society overall. So that's where I come from on that.
Go ahead.
I did like to add on. I think at the forum we look at it in a different way. We've not been focusing on job loss, but we've been focusing on reskilling, because that will be, mind you, the most important agenda for digitization taking over. And many countries in a very, very aggressive way are looking at this agenda. We in India are not doing much about it. We are talking definitely a lot about it, but we are not looking into it. So of late we have started to know that some of the IITs and some of the technical universities have now started giving diplomas and degrees on artificial intelligence and cyber information. But these would be the skills that would be required in the future. The forum has just recently unveiled their global risks report 2020, and 2 risks are being listed in the top 10. One is on number 6, which is information infrastructure destruction. That's the 6th risk. And on number 8 or 9 is the cybersecurity risk. A lot of the top 5 risks are related to definitely nature, climate change and biodiversity. But what I meant to say is that skilling will be an agenda for the next 5 to 10 years, and it should be to actually create some kind of a action plan for people to not think of it in a negative way.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello, sir. Hello, panel. Thanks for the wonderful and humorous session. I am working, we are a pre-launch startup, a neurotech startup. So I have my one question to Ms. Aditi and Ms. Chawla. So you talked about the break in links between government and the companies and industries. And from the perspective of VCs, what is the one thing that we can be confident, what is the projection of all these things to be getting right, the policies, and one suggestion that you can give for aspiring entrepreneurs like us?
Just to make sure we answer the right question, I'm reframing your question. Please confirm if it's correct.
Yes.
From the point of view of a small young entrepreneur, how should he organize himself so that he can get all these agencies aligned?
So what is the point of confidence in the future for us?
So go ahead.
All these things will be okay.
Yeah,
if you know the answer to that, tell me.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, I think what's unfortunately happening in every society is technology is moving far faster than society or regulations or laws or governments are indeed moving. You've seen what's happening in the trials of Facebook in the US. You've seen how social media is being abused in politics now. So I think these answers are that you will not have an answer. That the entrepreneurs will have to probably fight regulation, fight all these things or obstacles and keep moving ahead. I don't see a situation where government will be so proactive that, of course, there are now some institutions are waking up. So RBI is creating sandboxes, NPCI is creating sandboxes, but the reality is that they will always lag the individual entrepreneur and his capability to innovate. And that's the way it's always been. Right? The first guy to make the wheel didn't go to a government department to get an approval, right? So essentially, I don't think there is a clear answer to these things. The way it has to be that it will be a challenge to build a startup, and it should always be. So you will win because you fight these circumstances.
May I add to that? You know, one of the things that back when I started my career long ago, we used to have a very special emphasis in our training on the business environment. I'm pleased to see that Dr. Pallavi still runs a program called Business Environment. Somewhere during the time of liberalization, 25 years ago, people said, now you don't need this course anymore. There was an utopic version that business environment is now sorted out with liberalization. But the law of unintended consequences comes into play, every economic action that you take. So you will continue to have business environment. The nature of it is different from what I might have managed 50 years ago. And I fully agree with Haresh that it's part of your advocacy skills. Many entrepreneurs lack advocacy skills. And I think it's very important. This is a suggestion I would make. And I don't know if entrepreneur training, do they give advocacy skills? They don't. You know, like senior managers in traditional organizations should be taught how to listen. And people who are starting entrepreneurs should be taught how to be advocates. Both these are training lacunae which I think will get corrected because we are realizing.
Advocacy is like lobby, you say?
No, advocacy is advocacy.
Open dialogue.
Lobby is lobby.
Right, one more
You
question.
know, it's like saying is Swiggy a bunch of cooks? I think Vivek will not agree with that. Right, any others? We are running out of time.
We have one more question.
One more
up there on the
question.
side.
Good afternoon, everyone. My question to Mr. Ramesh Ramachandran. Oh, first of all, I tell you, I'm Ripan from SPJIMR PGPM 2020 batch. Mr. Ramesh, I have two questions for you. Question number one is, how do you see in this present situation of the Indian economy, considering your competitors only, how to improve in the business, to compete with your competitors or to collaborate with your competitors? And question two is, you talked about the introduction of artificial intelligence in farming sectors and agriculture sectors. How do you consider this giving training or reskilling to your end customers? Because it is easy to reskill your employees, but it is quite difficult or quite a Herculean task to train the end customers. So how do you consider, or any roadmap for you to this?
Okay, so I'll just take it in that order. From a competition perspective, we have a strong focus on building a service layer to what we're doing. So, I mean, the world over, you're probably seeing that hardware and software are merging, and hardware companies almost everywhere are becoming services companies in some form. Now, our belief is that our ability to be able to do this well through a new business that we're trying to create called farming as a service will be quite vital to our competitive advantage going forward. So just going beyond being a product company, and what this really means is the ability to handhold a farmer throughout the crop cycle by offering not just products but advisory services, rental services, digital services, etc. So to make customers more sticky in that way, and we think we have a starting advantage by way of the various businesses we already have within M&M. So we have the products business, we have a rental business, we have an advisory business, crop industry. It's about bringing this whole thing together. So at least what we think is that this is an area that can potentially give us competitive advantage going forward. We don't particularly collaborate as much as perhaps companies in the auto sector do or the oil and gas sector do. So in farming, you don't see that much collaboration. There is a little bit, but not that much. You know, I think going forward from an advocacy perspective, there should certainly be a lot of collaboration, because many of the things we want are similar by way of government involvement and so on, but we don't wait around waiting for all that to happen. We have to carry on with our lives. Your second question was about training the end user in terms of all the changes. So there's two aspects to that. One is, you know, like I said, our focus is on the smaller landholder. And if you really want to address the small landholder successfully, you've got to make your solutions simple. So if you're going to make your solution in a manner that is going to require a retraining, you're probably fighting a losing battle. And so if you go to, the US, for example, and you see some of the more advanced farm equipment like the John Deere equipment, and you go into the cab where the farmer drives, it's almost like a cockpit. It is intimidating, right? So you probably don't want to go down that route, but you want to offer them the same benefits to the smaller landowner without having to go through all that choreography. So this simplicity element is very important. Now, that's one aspect to it. I suppose there is a natural limit to how simple you can make it. The other point I would make is, you've got to make the technology, the front end of the technology is so simple, which means that the back end has to be quite complex, because only then can you do this. So you have to make the interface so simple. All the hard work has to be done in the back, so the consumer doesn't really know what's going on. And so technology has to help technology to make itself more prevalent. So, I mean, that's how we're looking at it.
Thanks, Ramesh. Our time is up. That's why Vinita is a very stern person, so I'm scared of her. We are over by 2 minutes, so Vinita, we will stop.
We're okay, sir. You want to take one more question?
No, she wants to make a comment.
I just wanted to augment what Ramesh was saying, and just to answer the second part of the question, which related to how do you make sure that the grassroots level is skilled to utilize that technology. It's an inward-looking statement, and maybe it's for some of us sitting over here, is that, as I said, the civil society agenda in India needs a little bit of innovation, and it needs a little bit more outreach, awareness, and collaboration. So just for an example, I had this random meeting with a civil society organization by the name of SEWA. Reema Bain runs this. She is part of the trustees of the International Labour Organization as well. And I went into this room which was full of the behne who actually goes to the farm to collect the data, which says how much has been the harvest for a particular day, what is the climate situation, what is the soil situation, so on and so forth. These are, by the way, very, very rural, village women who are doing this work. And I started to think, what should I talk over here which would resonate with them? And as soon as I took the name of drone and I said, do you know what drone is? And they were like, Aditi Ben, we know what drone is. And we go in the farm and we actually have loaned a drone between 10 villages, which goes and takes aerial survey of these lands and comes back. And that was partially possible because there was an outreach by the corporates to these civil society organizations who take up an active agenda in reskilling the grassroots level, which means the community engagement, as well as the fact, as to what Ramesh said, that the commands are very simple. The drones have just 3 commands, which is take the flight, collect the data, and turn back. So which is very simple for anybody who is very lay person to just learn and operate. So I think to go back, most of the corporates in India could do better in outreach and awareness and collaborating with such civil society organizations who are making these things possible. So We Robotics, SEWA, most of these civil society organizations have made an agenda for themselves that they will actually engage the community by skilling them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I must thank, we are a very distinguished panel because he's India's largest agricultural services and products company. Haresh, I think it's fair to count you amongst the leading lights in private equity. And Aditi, you set up your new center. And Ajay, your winning smile speaks for the financial services, which is otherwise in the doldrum. So, and thank you for the audience because you've been wonderful.
And you are the most wonderful host we can ever have, RG. I would request Professor Renuka Kamath to please come on stage and give you a little token of our appreciation and a little gift. We should do something about the AC. My student team, can we do something about the AC? It is very cold here. So, RG, first. So, ladies first. Aditi, please, a round of applause. Thank you for your time, Aditi. Mr. Srinivasan, thank you, sir. That is indeed a lovely smile that you have. Mr. Chawla, thank you, sir. And Ramesh, who is also an SPJIMR alum. Thank you so much, Ramesh, for coming over today. Thank you, Renuka, for bringing him in today. It's wonderful to have another alum in the midst. And Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan. Thank you very much. Big round of applause. I know we are hungry, but we can clap better. Lunch is served. We should go out for lunch. We'll be back at 2:15 exactly. And there has to be a picture. Please, let's have a picture. While we are getting together for a picture, I just want to remind you to tweet, to retweet. We are putting out a lot of stuff on the internet this morning. We are actually trending in the top 20 already in India at SBAC 2020. So please, if you collaborate, then we can probably reach top 10 as well. So thank you very much. We'll meet exactly at 2:15. We'll restart. We have 2 more sessions at panels and 1 fantastic keynote speaker coming up at the end of the day. Thank you and come back soon.